I don't know what it is about this group, but I had the privilege of talking on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with Reverend Connie. So here I am talking about Jesus again. This is sort of interesting when you were doing that beautiful meditation. And that was, I'm hardly out of it yet. I have to talk. I thought about Jesus saying, you have to forgive me also. And that came to me, even in the teachings of our childhood. I mean, there were things that I couldn't really understand. You know, there were just these pieces about what Jesus was supposed to have said. You know, and I was brought up by a Southern Baptist. I was, you know, very well trained. And I kept questioning, though. It was difficult. It was difficult to accept and understand what was being said. So it's so interesting to me that I've been given the opportunity to try to present a different point of view, because I finally have come to understand, I think, for myself, not for you, but for myself, what this teaching was and how relevant, how extremely relevant it's been always, but today, more than ever, it is profoundly important. So the reason I called it originally Palms and a Donkey was I wanted to speak a little bit about the metaphysical and different ideas that were in our Bible. And before I can really tell you about that, I felt I needed to remind us that, do you want me to speak louder?
Yes.
Oh. I wanted to have a microphone. I wanted to tell you that because I have a tendency not to speak loud. So I'll try. I'll try really hard. And if I go down, you'll say, up, up. All right. Okay. I want to take us back 500 years, just for a minute, before we go all the way back to the time of Jesus. And I want to remind us that until that time, the words of this story were in Latin. And the average person did not know Latin. Okay? You had to be educated. You had to be a member of the upper classes, and you had to be a hierarchy church persona to really understand that language. Right? And when the first person decided we should put this into the common language, if you remember your history of the time of Henry VIII and Martin Luther and Sir Thomas More, you realize that people were being tortured and killed for the very act of translating those words into common English. All right? Some of the things that we take for granted in our era. 500 years isn't that long ago. Think about that. Okay, now, the king who got rid of his wife, Henry VIII, to marry Anne Boleyn, changed the church, changed religion. Also radically suggested that maybe the church and state should be separate. Okay. Not that long ago, and again, lots of heads literally rolled over these ideas. So, I mean, we need to remember this is not a long time, 500 years, not very long ago. Okay? People left their countries and came to another place to experience the ability, not just to choose the Namaste Center over the Methodist Church, but to literally be able to think for themselves without fear. Okay? And that's really, really important. So after Elizabeth I, who was the first major Protestant queen of England, right? She left her throne to James of Scotland, and he had been Catholic, son of Mary, Queen of Scots, promised to be Protestant, had a Bible written. Okay, so I'm going to come to the throne, and to show you what a great Protestant I am, I'm going to commission this work, which we have all somewhat come into contact with, the King James Version of the Bible. Okay? Now, in order to do this Bible, he took the greatest writers of his time. You were the king, wasn't hard to do. You were a person getting a commission from the king, this is also wonderful, right? So one of the writers of this book was Sir Francis Bacon. And Sir Francis Bacon is known as an essayist. But what a lot of people don't realize about this time frame was that even though in the forefront you never spoke of these things, in the background there were metaphysical practices, and they were huge. You had to be very careful because there were inquisitions and things like that. You know, so you didn't want anyone to know. But Francis Bacon had a circle of 13, just like the man we're speaking about had a circle of 13, 12 disciples and himself. Okay? And they were very involved with metaphysics. So the reason I can tell you that there is metaphysical symbolism in the story that we read in the King James Version is because these people put it there. They put it there for the minds, just like, how many of you have read the Da Vinci Code or seen the movie? Okay, he talks about the symbolism that the painters, you know, they had to hide, but they didn't lose it. They wanted to keep it going. You know, everybody wasn't writing and everybody wasn't able to have access to books. So, we have absolutely got this metaphysical symbolism in the Bible, and there is even a book you could get called the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, right? And you could read lots of interesting things about what's being told to you through these stories. So, you know, when we look at the life of Jesus, first of all, you know, we see a birth, and then we understand he went through teaching and his time with the temple. We don't know what happened to him for about 30 years. We're not sure where he was. People write books about that now too, don't they? And then he has a temptation. We know that story in the wilderness where they offered him, you know, fame, fortune, and women, you know, and he said, no, I think I'll skip that part. Okay, and then we know that he had an initiation with John the Baptist. So he came into his I am the Son of God moment. That's where they first start talking about that. And then he does this storytelling. He starts doing miracles and he starts his ministry. And at the time, we were given the King James Version. What Jesus spoke on the Sermon on the Mount was very, very different in my experience now than what he was actually saying. Our King James Version in English has been translated from a Greek translation originally of words that were spoken in Jesus' language, Aramaic, which is very similar to Hebrew. He would have been speaking his own language. He wouldn't have had the highfalutin language of the Romans. He wouldn't have spoken to his countrymen in anything other than his own voice. In the Sermon on the Mount, he gave us two pieces. One is the Lord's Prayer, and the other is the Beatitudes. When I was first introduced to the notion that there was another idea about what the Lord's Prayer could sound like, I mean, I think everybody knows the Lord's Prayer. If they don't, it starts, Our Father, who is in heaven. Okay? That's the beginning, isn't it?
Yes.
We've all agreed.
Yes.
Okay. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. Okay, now, what we want to first remember is that this was being written for a king. Okay? And we want to understand that this was being written in a time when the church and the state was so intensely powerful and that the average person was so, lowly, and with the word peasant would come up, right? And that's the mass of the population. So those images are very relevant. Aren't those images relevant to someone in those days? Kingdoms, thy will, So when I met the Aramaic version of the Lord's Prayer, I was completely blown away. I was so fascinated. And I was able to learn a little bit more. So before we get to his actual entry into Jerusalem and the symbolism of this, I want to take you to the words, some of the words, and the Aramaic interpretation. First of the Lord's Prayer, and then of just two of the Beatitudes, because these were two, the Beatitudes I really couldn't get. I mean, they just say things that are so odd, like, blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall
hunger and thirst.
They shall see God.
Or inherit the
Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. What? I mean, should I not strive? Should I be poor in spirit? Should I? I'm confused. I don't understand. See, some people were also confused with me. I'm happy to know that. Because for a long time I thought I was the only one that was confused. Okay. So, first I want to tell you that the Sermon on the Mount, everything has a symbolism. You could say these are teachings from a higher level. Because the mountain rises above the plain, doesn't it? So when Jesus is teaching from a higher level, he is sending this prayer out. He's saying this, you take this in and hear this and be this. Okay, I actually could try to do the Aramaic, but at the very end, when Charlotte reminds me I only have 7 minutes left, we're going to do something, we're going to intone an Aramaic word for light. Nura.
What?
We're going to intone Nura.
Oh, I like it. Nura.
Nura. It's, and like many cultures that have these types of words, Sanskrit, Coptic, you mentioned going to a Coptic conference, Hebrew, a word like light doesn't just mean light. It is an all-encompassing word for the light of all that is, the light that makes you live, the light that brings wisdom. It's all of that. And so we're going to intone later to awaken the potential of that within us, because that's what intoning does. It starts, the prayer to our Father starts with the word Avun, which is another one you could tone, because what this is the all that is birther, O thou from whom the breath of life comes, O creator, father creator, mother creator of all that is, who fills all realms of sound, light, and vibration. May your light be experienced in my utmost holiest self. Your heavenly domain comes to me. That will come true. In all the universe, that truth will vibrate. Here and in all the universe. Give us wisdom for all our daily needs from this place. Source my wisdom. Detach what I am attached to as fault that binds me in a karmic circle. Just like what Charlotte just did with us. So that we can let others also detach. If I detach, you can detach. If I keep holding on, let us not be lost in the superficial things of life, but let us be fed from that which keeps us on our true purpose. From you comes From this comes the all-working will, the lively strength to act, the song that beautifies all, renews itself from age to age, sealed in trust, faith, and truth. The word Amen actually means from the entire ground of being, let my actions go forth. And that's another one. If you intone that word, you will, I literally, even just saying it now, I could feel my connection to the earth. It's fascinating. So I highly recommend a little trip around the Aramaic world. You can find this. Search Aramaic translations. There are people like, it's not Neil Donald Walsh. It's going to sound like that to your brain if you're into conversations with God, but it's Neil Douglas Klotz with a K, who's a famous translator that people will go to. There's a fellow called Dale Allen Hoffman who has material. You can see YouTubes all over the internet, and we'll probably get to see him here sometime. Okay. The Beatitudes also. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to church every Sunday, and I'm not going to get there. You told me I was going to get there, but he says I'm not. This is the first beatitude in Aramaic, the teaching of Yeshua, which would have been the Aramaic word for Jesus. Divinely attuned and consciously ripe in this present moment are those who have their true home in the emptiness of spirit and breath.
Wow.
For they shall realize the blissfully empowering presence of life itself. I can go with that one. I mean, I can really see, and I can see him teaching this to a group of people who, if they were Jews, you know, we can look at Romans, but we can also look at Jews, can't we? And we can say that there was a big dichotomy in the Jewish religion also. Every religion has its mystical sect. And the people who are in the letter of the law don't like that sect. And, you know, people who are here who've been familiar with the teachings of Kabbalah, you know that at a certain time you could be killed for that. Reading that was, you know, you had to hide in caves. And so the mystical teachings of a Jew were not going over so well with Jews from a certain point of view. So, not just Romans, who also had a certain point of view. You know, hearing this, wow, you know, you get the whole empowering presence of life because you're just breathing. Wow. Everybody can have this because guess what? We all breathe. How about, let's do the meek. Shall we do the one for the meek?
Yeah,
yes.
please. Yeah.
Let's do it. Divinely attuned and consciously ripe in the present moment are those who allow their inner structures of comfort in relation to others and self to melt back into the empty potential of no thingness, for they shall realize their oneness within the infinite diversity of creation.
Whoa.
I mean, I don't know who else has chills, but I've got them.
Yeah.
And I've read this one before, you know. And I really tell you, we are headed for this paradigm shift. And when we move into this paradigm, we can't take the old stuff with us. So if we're all capable of breath and going into that present moment, like I said to Charlotte and Lindsay, when I look at Jesus after reading Aramaic, I see Eckhart Tolle, Yogananda, Michael Brown, You know, I see them, all of these tied into this beautiful, beautiful teacher who would have been really controversial to people who had a big stake in materialism, right?
Yes.
And the power over others, which is a separation which stops a oneness from being possible. You can't achieve oneness if I am not you. You know, if I'm this, you know, if you think you couldn't have gotten to this without hearing me, that's a problem too. I mean, you brought yourselves here to open to what I'm saying, but you have this within you, each of you, all of you. So you just gave me the privilege of being able to tell you. So this could open a beautiful door for you. Maybe this will be a way for you to forgive Jesus for saying these confusing things to you in your childhood, you know, that made you maybe move away from those teachings altogether. Like me, I went to Buddhism for a while. I mean, I was seeking something other than that because it was so confusing. And as Charlotte gave us this beautiful entry to the Easter, you know, he goes through all this and then he gets killed. That's annoying, too. Right? So I'm glad I wasn't the only one. That's what I have to say. So search out the Aramaic. You can feel the beauty. All the Beatitudes will just lift you into another dimension if you read them. And the Lord's Prayer, it'll just give you a whole other way of seeing this. So these were the words that he was sending out in his teachings from a higher place, where he's basically empowering everyone listening with the truth of beingness. You know, the famous lilies of the field, you know, consider the lilies, they toil not, but they are taken care of. We're taken care of, you know, in order to realize that. We're breathing. We have the breath of life, all of us, okay? So once he has done this and done a few miracles also, probably also have great symbolism, but I didn't go there. But you know, anything that I'm telling you today could be a lecture on its own. Isn't that true? Mm-hmm. I mean, like a series of lectures on its own. You could go so deep into everything. He now makes what they refer to as a triumphal entry. This is the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Jerusalem, first of all, wasn't always called Jerusalem. Like we have countries changing names now, so we can understand that it isn't, everything hasn't always been the way it is. So particularly in a land where there was lots of wars and conquerings, there were name changes. It was the land of Canaan before it was Jerusalem, right? For instance. But also, which is really fascinating and brings me to the donkey part. This is one of my favorite authors in the world. I would marry him. He's married.
Tom Robbins?
And this is Tom Robbins. And this particular book is called Skinny Legs and All. And it discusses the Palestinian issues, the Arab-Israeli. And this is before the Gulf War when he wrote this. So if you read this, it'll knock your socks off. Also, his characters are very funny. You can read it on any level, but he's very deep. He's really an incredibly deep author. Tackles big issues. So I was reading this book for like the 8th time because you can reread him a lot. And I came upon this. And so when I was asked to speak, I said, I gotta tell them this. The country of Palestine, which had been called Canaan. So Jerusalem was Canaan, was Palestine. Okay. Was named for P-A-L-E-S, Palace. Palace was a deity. I'm going going to use a word you might not like. The ass god. So you know that's a donkey. Right? Or the ass goddess. Usually he was male, but sometimes she was female, and sometimes its gender was a tad ambivalent. The name Pallas was Arabic, having come out of Libya, but the Hebrews loved the long-eared bisexual no less than the Arabs. Tacitus, the Roman historian, wrote that the Semites fell into venerating the ass because had it not been for wild asses, they never would have survived in the desert. It was probably more complicated than that. The ass was a savior who provided milk, meat, shoe leather, and transportation. And this is Tom Robbins' idea, I think. What the Bible calls the golden calf was actually the golden ass, since there were never many cows in the Levant. The ass was also obstinate, silly, and sexually crude. Now, Pan, the goat god of Greece, is a very similar resonance to this, right? Embodying all of those characteristics, Pallas was trickster, fertility spirit, and sacred clown, presiding over humankind's unruly passions, giving mortals what they needed, but not before having some fun with them. Okay. So Jesus specifically asks for a donkey that has never been ridden before. Why? Because he was into virgins? That I think the church thought that because they wanted everybody, you know, to be celibate. But the way I look at this is this. If this is a metaphor, which I believe it is, it could have been true events, I'm also okay with that. But within the true events, there is a stunning metaphor for all of us. So he just got finished telling you how to achieve the kingdom. Okay, now, in Aramaic, the word is malkutah. At the end, right? And that signifies a feminine in that language, feminine ending, So also what he was speaking about was not a kingdom. So he taught us how to achieve that oneness of spirit through what? Right. Going within ourselves and breathing. Focusing within and breathing. I think, again, Eckhart Tolle has pretty much suggested this. Try going in there and just breathe. Maybe things will look different to you. Maybe they will. Maybe you'll achieve connection to that oneness. Right? So he has told us how. He gave us directions, and it's pretty simple. Doesn't cost you a lot of money. Don't even have to attend a series of workshops. All you have to do is breathe. Just breathe. So he's told us this. So this means he himself has now achieved this in the story, the metaphor. He has come to this also. So he could tell you. Right? So now he's going to enter into Jerusalem, which my friend here could help me even better with the Hebrew words because she knows them better than I do. But basically what it means is a city of peace or a place of peacefulness and harmony. So that's the metaphor for where he was headed. But it had been Palestine. I won't even get into Canaan, but it had been Palestine, and it is now. And we can see what's going on there under the name.
Oh my.
So what he chooses, or the symbolism of choosing to ride on the donkey, is like the symbolism of the strength card in a tarot deck where a woman is holding open the jaws of a lion. He is riding this force that is still within all of us. The God palace exists as a resonance within every human being. You can't get through your physical third dimensional life without a little palace coming in. Right? It's got to be there, and it can be fun too. It's the trickster. It's a clown. It's humor. It's over there. So, but he chooses one that has never been ridden so that he can, am I almost there?
Yeah.
I'm almost there, okay. So that he can ride it. It's never been bent to any other person's nature. He will ride this virgin energy. So he is taking the donkey into Jerusalem. The donkey is not necessarily taking him. It's a combo. So that shows the ascension of awareness, consciously ripe in this moment. Where did he leave from? This was an interesting thing when I read this. There was a place on Long Island called Bethpage. Some of you may know that, but this is a little distortion of this town's name, Bethpage, which was the place they kept the figs, which meant they were ripening them. So he leaves from the place of ripening to go to the house of peace, to go to the city of harmony. And the waving of the palms, okay? You're living in the Middle East, you're not agrarian, you don't have a lot of food. There's a lot of desert. The date palm was like this donkey, responsible for life. It was the victory of life, not the victory of victory, but the fact that you could still live. So people are saying this is a victory of life, of the realization of life that is above, still has the animal qualities and instincts of the donkey, but is able to fully direct them into a place of harmony and peace. So since I'm close to the end of my talk, I'll leave you with all of that so you can just kind of, and think about that this week also, about how you can bring yourself to a place of harmony and peace. And then hear Charlotte tell us how you can actually now find this total transformation, which is the the final part of his story for us. So in order to give you a little boost on that, when the intoning, my friend Janet and I went to a circle where they were doing this. And it really, if you do a lot of it, you kind of like alter, dramatically. And it's fun. And it's also very inexpensive. It's like, you don't have to do much. All you have to do is make a sound with your outgoing breath. Now the difference between like chanting and intoning, right? There's a difference. When we chant with someone. Right? And we try to keep the same, if you listen to Hindu chanting, you're not going all over the place, right? But intoning is personalized. So you go in and you do it your way. You do it at your length. You do it with your sound. Now, you might not be able to do that today because, here we are in a group of people, but when you get home, if you want to do this, you can do it, and you'll probably feel more comfy, go in your own way. So what I'm going to do is start you, and then, I'll start you with the 3 breaths. We're going to take 3 deep breaths through our nose. I'll start you. And then on the 4th breath, on the exhale, the word we're going to intone, and we're going to close our eyes so we can go inside for it, is new, like new, Ra, like Ra. Ra. Like surprise, it's the same word, polite. So, so we're going to do new ra, and then we're going to take a breath and release it, and then we're going to do another breath and do another one. We're going to do 3 of them. And then we're going to sit with it just for a little tiny minute so you can just stay inside with what you're feeling. Okay? And then then that's the end. So let's start with the breath. So in through the nose. Amen. And namaste.
Namaste.